Hi guys, I'm glad to be with you again, and this month we are doing something special. The month of February is Black History Month, and that means that our country celebrates the contributions and heritage and history of many African and Haitian Americans here in the United States. And so every art lesson during the month of February, we're going to learn about a Black artist who has made amazing contributions to our culture and to our world. And then we're going to create some art in the same style as that artist. And today's artist is somebody that I sure wish that I could have known. Her name was Alma Woodsey Thomas. And she's not your typical artist. In fact, if you saw her, you might just think that she was somebody's grandma. Take a look and see what she looked like. The thing about Mrs. Thomas is that she didn't even become a famous artist until she was grandma age. She didn't even become a famous artist until she was 68 years old. But that doesn't mean that she wasn't an artist before then. In fact, deep down inside of her, she always knew she was an artist. She was a little girl who grew up in Georgia, and in her backyard, the dirt was like clay. And she would go in her backyard and she would make sculptures and puppets out of the clay that was in her backyard. And she loved to draw and create when she was in elementary school. But unfortunately, in the town where she lived and the time that she lived, people of color were not allowed to experience much of the arts. She was not allowed to go to the library. She was not allowed to go to museums. And so her family decided to move away from that town. And they moved to Washington, D.C., where she and her three sisters got to attend a public school. And for the first time, she got to take art classes. This was in high school when she first got to take art. Well, she loved it. And she kept drawing and kept creating. And lots of times she would make marionettes. Do you know what those are? They're like puppets on a string. If you've ever seen Pinocchio, that was something she loved to make. Well, she graduated from high school and then she went to a special school to learn how to become a teacher. And Miss Thomas taught kindergarten for 7 years. And then she decided that she wanted to go back to school. And so she started college when she was 30 years old. Lots of people start college when they're 18 or 19, but she was 30. And she went to a special school that had an art department, and she graduated with a degree in fine art. Now, not only was it unusual that she was 30 years old when she started her degree, but she was the very first African-American woman to ever graduate in the United States with a degree in fine art. And so you'd think that then she would become a famous artist. But nope. You know what she did? She taught junior high. In fact, she taught art to junior high students for 35 years. And she built into them a love of art, and she got to explore all kinds of artists. So some people might think that she didn't become a famous artist until she was 68 years old. But I bet in the eyes of her students, she was a famous artist for all of those 35 years. Well, after she was done teaching, when she was the age of a grandma, that's when her famous art career really began to explode. And she began to paint in watercolor and in acrylic rather than sculpt. And I want to show you some of her artwork.
Alma Thomas was an abstract artist. That means that her paintings weren't of things or places. They were just paintings full of color and emotion, and she lets the viewer figure out what they are or how they make them feel. She painted with bursts of color, bold strokes. This next one was her most famous painting, and it hangs in a very special place. Want to guess where?
You might have guessed a fancy museum, but it actually hung in the White House during Barack Obama's presidency. Can you imagine what a special privilege that was? Let's look at two of her pieces side by side. The one on the left is pretty typical of her work, and it is an abstract with a radial image. That means that the colors radiate out of a circle on the page. The one on the right is a combination of two things. Look closely, and can you see the different lines of color? There are lines of color, but then there's also kind of an image at the bottom. Alma Thomas loved to create contrast using bright colors, warm colors next to cool colors, different widths of color. You can see on the one on the left that she did maybe one stripe of yellow, but then 4 of blue, and 1 of green, and then maybe 1 of black. She did different widths, different colors, different temperatures, and made really bright and beautiful art. So today we're gonna try to paint just like Alma Woodsey Thomas. We're going to divide our paper into 4 different sections and try our hand at 4 different types of painting that she did. We're gonna try a radial painting. That means a circle where it radiates out. And this one we're gonna do in the center, just like that famous painting that hung in the White House. We're gonna do a radial painting where the circle belongs somewhere else on the paper. So it'll start in a corner of that section. We're going to create just a lined painting. You can either go vertical or horizontally. And then we're gonna create something a little bit more abstract. And in fact, as I'm looking at this, I have my paper upside down, but it doesn't matter because it's still beautiful. The way that I created this one was to imagine some mountains and then a sunset sky. So go ahead and grab your watercolors, a little jar of water and your paintbrush, grab a pencil, and then grab your glue stick if you have it. And if you don't have your glue stick, a Coke bottle lid or a milk lid or something like that, just to trace our circles. That's all we're going to need that for today. So get your paper, your paints, your glue stick, and let's create together. All right, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and fold our paper into 4 sections. And it might feel a little bit overwhelming to do 4 different art projects today, but I think that we're actually going to enjoy that rather than doing one big piece. Plus, at the end, if you end up liking one more than the other, we'll always be able to cut it out and you could glue it on some colored paper or glue it on a card or something. I think it looks beautiful all together like this, but this gives us lots of options to try lots of things. So we're going to fold our paper. Let's go left to right first, or do the sides first, and we make them line up pretty evenly there. Hold with one hand. Slide your hand out that way, press to the top, press to the bottom, and open it up. And then we're going to do the same thing from the bottom to the top. See how I'm lining my paper up right there? I'm going to hold it with one hand and then I'm going to press with my other. If you need to stop the video for just a minute and get a grown-up to help you do that, that's perfectly fine. We'll always be here for you. Okay, now we have 4 different sections, and we're going to start with our line section today, just to get a feel for what it feels like to make these little strokes with our watercolors. I want you to grab your watercolor brush and look at it for a minute with me. You see how we've got this nice little point so it looks like a teardrop or a flame? I've heard another art teacher say it looks like toes pointed. We want to keep our brush looking like that for this whole project. We don't want it to look like a chicken foot. Let's see if I can even do it. You know, sometimes we're tempted to scrub our brushes like that and they get all crazy and hairy like a troll doll. We don't want that. We want to keep them nice and smooth and pointy like that. And what we're going to do is we are going to practice pressing and lifting just to make little dashes on our paper.
Now you'll notice in this one here that I have some big strokes, then I have some little dots, some more big strokes, and some little dots, and we're going to practice all of that. Now here's a tip. If you are right-handed, like I am, you are going to start in the upper left-hand corner. We're going to do this square first, then move to this square, then move to this square, and then move to this square. The reason we do that is when we're finished with a square, we can move on to the next one and not worry about ever brushing our arm over this. But if you are a lefty, if you like to use your left hand to write your name and to draw, you're going to start in this corner. So you're going to start in the upper right-hand corner for the same reason, because then when you finish this square, you can move to here without messing anything up. So let's get started. Get your watercolors open. You can tell I've used a lot of my watercolors this year, haven't I? And you might have some new watercolors too. I think maybe you got some for Christmas. But let's go ahead and practice those strokes. So I'm dipping my brush in my water. My water's off the screen a little bit. Wiping it on here a little bit. Then I'm going to gently swirl it around in one of my colors. And I'm just going to make a line of dashes just in this, for me, because I'm right-handed. I'm going to make it in this square up here. It's not a square, silly Mrs. Burke, it's a rectangle. In this rectangle up here, if I'm left-handed, I'm going to start over here. I have two people in my family who are left-handed, so I always think about them and how they might do art a little bit differently. So I have my brush loaded with good color. It's still nice and pointy like that. And I'm going to just make little dashes. I want you to notice something. What am I doing with my pinky? I use my pinky like a kickstand. I use my pinky to help steady my hand and to help me make that line going straight. Now notice, did I care that my little dashes are next to each other? Nope. In fact, I kind of like them a little bit different. I'm going to do 3 lines of that first color. Maybe you're going to do 1 line, maybe you're going to do 2. And then I'm going to rinse my brush and pick a different color. You get to choose whatever colors you want. Pick all your favorites. You get to decide how many rows of each color you're going to do. But this one is just practice. I think I'm going to do 2 little rows of blue here. I'm going to rinse my brush. Now my next row, I'm going to do little strokes, almost like little polka dots. Loading my brush up with a really dark green. And again, I'm using that pinky as a kickstand. And I'm just almost just tapping my paper. It's almost like I'm making little leaves. I think I'm going to do 3. I'm going to get a little bit more paint on my brush. Isn't that cool how you can just tap your brush on the paper and get that neat look? I'm going to move my water over here so I don't keep putting my arm in your way. All right, I'm going to choose a new color now. I'm going to do that big, pretty, bright yellow. But I think I'm just going to do 1 of those. Let's see, what should I do next? Alma Thomas used lots and lots and lots of colors in her work. So I'm using lots and lots and lots of colors in mine. Do I have room for... I think I'm going to do just that, and then I think I'm going to do a dark blue to finish it. I so wish that I could be with you and see all the amazing colors that you chose and how you're keeping your paintbrush nice and pointy, using that little pinky kickstand. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Kind of missed a spot there, didn't I? I can always go back. There. Now we made a beautiful Alma Thomas painting in just a few minutes. Now, let's do one of our radial paintings. So we're going to take the lid off of your glue stick. And for this one, we're going to put it about as close to the center of the page as we can. Hold it with one finger, and with the other, just lightly trace around it. Remember, when we trace around things, you can always pick up your pencil. You don't have to bend your wrist all funny just to get around an item. So I'm picking up my pencil, lightly tracing around. Whoop, had some glue on there, it was sticking. So I've got that little circle there. I'm going to erase that little extra bit. And that's going to be where I start this painting. So I'll show you on here. I started there, and then we're going to do our dashes around, but we're still doing rows like we did up here, but they're going to be circular rows. So I'm going to start this one with a, what color center? I'm going to start it with a purple center. You can start yours with any color you want. But I'm doing the same thing. I'm keeping my brush smooth. This is a slow project. You take your time. Doesn't matter if you totally fill in your circle or not. I kind of traced the outside. I'm going back. Great thing about watercolors is you can always add another layer later. So I'm going to leave that like that. But just like Ms. Thomas did, I'm going to make my first row those same dashes in that same color. And I'm going to do another row just like it. So I'm just pressing and pulling those little dashes around my circle. So now we're going to radiate. That means we're going to go out from there, choosing some other colors. I'm going to do orange next because I know that orange and purple, when they're next to each other, look really bright and fun. And I'm just pressing, pulling those little lines around there. I'm going to do a couple more here. So I did 2 rows there. Now I think I'm going to do one more because I did 2 with the purple. No, I'm not. We can always change our mind in art, can't we? I'm going to do a yellow here. And I'm going to press my brush a little bit harder on this row. See how I'm pressing down a little bit more? And so my strokes look a little bit thicker. You guys remember what the art is called where we put lots of little pieces together to make one big piece? Shout it out if you remember it. If you said mosaic, you're right. This is kind of like a mosaic of watercolor. I'm changing my colors now, and I'm going to do some pink. Though my pink is looking a little bit orange, isn't it? I so wish I could see what colors you were picking. And now notice here, I've gotten to the edge of my paper. I don't want to overlap into my other painting. I'm just going to pretend that I'm making some invisible strokes, and I'm going to come back around. I'm going to do another little layer of pink. Now I'm going to do something totally strong and different because I've got some warm, soft colors going there. I'm going to do a dark green next. I'm almost to the edge of my page. Ooh, look at how that pops out of there. Doesn't that look bright and fun? I'm going to come back up here and do it on this side. And see, I've got a little space here. I'm just going to go ahead and fill in those corners with the green. Now, if I wanted to, I might say, ooh, I just love that green. I want to add a little bit more of that. I could come back and add a little row of little dots between my pink and my yellow, just because I think that looks fun. You can always, always add more paint. Do you think it will fit? Maybe just a little bit. There we go. All right, that's 1, 2 Alma Thomas paintings finished. Now, let's do another radial painting, but this time put our circle in the corner. And it doesn't matter which corner you do it in. Remember, if you're a righty, we're going to do it on this bottom corner, but if you're a lefty, start yours over here somewhere. I'm going to put my circle right up here in this corner, and I'm going to trace keep sticking. And I'm going to do this one totally different than that one. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to choose, I'm going to do this one in rainbow order. Do you remember what that is from our last lessons? Rainbow order, Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Or red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. So I'm going to start with red. And remember, you can pick any colors that you want. Maybe you only want to do 2 colors and alternate. Red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Totally up to you. This is your work of art. So I'm going to do red, and I'm going to do just a little row of red around. Can come back and fill those in a little bit. Then I'm going to move. What's our next color? Roy G. Biv. Next one is orange. Now I'm going to go around. Now remember, this one is a little different because it's in the corner, and so we're not going to be able to go all the way around very much at all. Now our radius is going to keep extending out this way. So I'm going to do a couple of rows of orange. I just love that bright orange. Let's move to our next color. Move to yellow. I think I'm just going to do 2 rows of yellow. I'm going to use the light green. Remember, in our paint trays we have 2 greens. We have a light green and a dark green. I haven't used that light green yet, so I'm going to use that next. And that's a happy green. I think I'm just going to do 1 green. And I'm going to do that light turquoisey blue next. Ooh, that still had some green in it. That's pretty. I'm going to make that one really big. I'm going to go back over those because I really like that color. And I think I'm going to mix. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to mix that turquoise and the dark blue together for my next row. And there's just a tiny little bit of it. And then I have that last little corner. What's our last color? Did you say purple? That's right. And I'm going to do those little. And there we have a radial rainbow painting. Now we have 1 more rectangle left. And this one is really anything you want it to be. I'm going to do those mountains again just so you can see how I did that. I'm going to take my pencil and just draw some squiggles. I'm going to do 2 rows of mountains, 2 little wiggles like that. Maybe I'll do a little sun up here, but it'll be smaller. And maybe I'm going to add one more little line down here. I'm going to say that this is going to be my grass. You can draw a football, a soccer ball, a flower, a sunset. You could do another radial painting. You could do 2 circles. You could do horizontal stripes. You could do diagonal stripes. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to do this just so you can watch me. I'm going to start in the middle of my painting, actually. I'm going to start with my purple mountains. And I'm going to do the same thing that Mrs. Thomas did. I'm going to start with my lines and then work up. Oop, look at that. My brush is getting a little wonky. I need to go back and smooth it out a little bit. Works best when we have that little pointed toe. I'm going to try to fill this in, but I'm also going to go up and make some dashes on my lines and let some of my lines fill those places. And then whenever we do a landscape, the colors always get a little bit lighter and a little bit cooler as we go off into the distance. So I'm going to do my second row. See how I'm still just doing those little dashety lines. Okay. And I'm going to do some green grass in the foreground. I think I'm going to do some of that darker green first. And then some of that lighter yellowy green up front. See the difference between those greens? It's subtle, but it's there. And then I'm going to do the top part of my painting as a radial painting. I'm going to paint my circle. And I'm going to do a little tiny miniature radial painting up here. Isn't it fun to fill a space with dashes of color instead of filling it all the way? Such an interesting thing for our eyes to look at. It's like our eyes get to go on a little adventure when they're looking at our painting. Maybe I want to put a little dashed line of red in here. There we go. So we just created 4 unique paintings, and yours probably look nothing like this. Yours might look completely different. And that's such a fun thing about art. Even though we have the same tools, we can each create something unique.
I so wish I could see what you created. I'll show you what this one looks like all finished. This is the one that you and I just created together. But you could leave it like this, or I have another idea. Remember how I mentioned at the beginning that you could cut them up into 4? Well, I just did that with the piece I showed you at the beginning. I cut them into 4 pieces, I glued them onto construction paper, and now I have art that I can give away. I have cards that I can give to friends and family, or I can use these as little stands, little standing frames to make them stand up in my studio. So many fun colors, and they look really neat with the background too. And then I had another idea while I was doing that. You know how Valentine's Day is coming up? What if you drew a heart and then did an Alma Thomas dash design all around it. So it would be like a radial painting, but with a heart in the middle instead. I might do that and then add a little picture at the end of this video. Maybe you want to try it too. If you do, will you send it to your teacher so I can see? I would love to see it. As always, guys, I had so much fun being with you today, and I love the privilege of getting to draw together even when we're apart.